Admiral Kang Minho stood before the massive viewing screen of the flagship Dominion's Edge and watched the stars bend around them as they traveled through hyperspace. The Valthari Empire had ruled over 1,000 worlds for 3 centuries, and no force in the galaxy could stand against their mighty fleets. Minho had served the Empire for 40 years, rising through the ranks with cold efficiency and tactical brilliance. His ancestors had been among the first humans to join the Valthari, when Earth was discovered and absorbed into the Empire generations ago. Now he commanded the largest battle fleet ever assembled by the Valthari, consisting of 200 of their most advanced warships. The bridge around him hummed with activity. As crew members from dozens of species worked at their stations, Fleet Captain Yoon Ji-won approached from the tactical center with a datapad in her hands. She was tall and confident, with the bearing of someone who had never known. Defeat Ji-won had requested this mission personally when the Empire identified a new target system in the Outer Rim. The system was small and unremarkable, with only one inhabited world, but the planet contained rare minerals that the Empire needed for their expanding territories. Minho accepted the datapad and reviewed the intelligence reports about their destination. The third planet from the star was called Earth by its inhabitants and housed a primitive civilization that had barely achieved basic spaceflight. According to their scouts, the humans had launched a few crude satellites and established a single small space station. Their technology appeared to be centuries behind even the most backward worlds in the Empire. What puzzled Minho were the ancient warnings they had discovered in precursor ruins throughout the galaxy. The precursors had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only cryptic messages carved in stone and metal. Many of these ruins contained warnings about specific regions of space that should be avoided. The Sol system where Earth resided was mentioned repeatedly, with phrases like, "Let the third world slumber," and "The children of Terra know only war." Ji-won dismissed these warnings as primitive superstition left behind by a dead civilization. She believed that no single world could pose a threat to the might of the Valthari Empire, regardless of what ancient ghosts might whisper from their graves. Commander Park Hyunwoo joined them at the viewing screen, carrying another set of reports. He served as the fleet's chief intelligence officer and had spent months analyzing data about their target. Hyunwoo was younger than the other senior officers, but had proven himself exceptionally skilled at understanding alien cultures and their weaknesses. His report contained disturbing information that had been troubling him for weeks. 3 separate reconnaissance missions had been sent to the Sol system over the past century, and none had ever returned. Each time the Empire sent sophisticated scout ships equipped with the finest stealth technology available. The ships would enter the system and begin their surveys, but then simply vanish without sending any distress signals or final transmissions. The Empire's high command had initially assumed the ships were destroyed by natural phenomena like solar flares or asteroid impacts. But Hyunwoo had discovered something else while analyzing the missing ships' planned routes. Each reconnaissance mission had been scheduled to observe Earth for exactly 72 hours before reporting back. All 3 ships had vanished at precisely the 68-hour mark of their missions. The timing was too exact to be coincidental, which suggested that something in the system was actively hunting and destroying Imperial scouts. Ji-won reviewed Hyunwoo's findings with growing irritation rather than concern. She argued that even if the humans had somehow detected and destroyed the scout ships, it proved nothing about their ability to resist a full battle fleet. The missing vessels were small and lightly armed, designed for stealth rather than combat. Her massive armada carried enough firepower to crack planets and reduce entire star systems to rubble. No primitive civilization could stand against such overwhelming force, regardless of how lucky they might have been against a few scout ships. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system and immediately began deploying into attack formation. Minho studied the tactical displays as his ships spread out across space like a vast net preparing to close around their prey. The sensor readings showed exactly what their intelligence had predicted. Earth appeared to be a standard terrestrial world with a single moon and no significant orbital infrastructure. A few primitive satellites circled the planet, broadcasting simple radio transmissions that the fleet's computers easily intercepted and translated. The transmissions were fascinating in their variety. The humans seemed to spend enormous amounts of time creating what they called entertainment. Music filled the airwaves along with dramatic performances and stories that the aliens found difficult to understand. But what truly puzzled the Valthari were the historical programs that seemed to dominate human broadcasts. The humans appeared obsessed with something they called wars. Their entire cultural output seemed focused on conflicts between different groups of their own species. They had fought thousands of wars throughout their recorded history, using increasingly sophisticated methods to kill each other. The humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over, yet somehow they had survived as a species. Hyun Woo found the historical broadcasts deeply disturbing. The humans did not fight wars the way civilized species did. Most galactic conflicts involved formal declarations followed by organized battles between military forces with clear objectives and honorable surrenders. Human warfare appeared to be something completely different. They targeted civilian populations, burned entire cities, and fought with a savage determination that seemed to ignore all rational calculations of cost and benefit. Their wars lasted for years or even decades, with neither side willing to accept reasonable terms for peace. They had developed concepts like total war and unconditional surrender that most galactic species found incomprehensible. Even more troubling were the humans' attitudes toward their own military history. Instead of being ashamed of their violent past, they celebrated it. They built monuments to their wars, wrote songs about their battles, and taught their children to admire the generals and soldiers who had killed the most enemies. Their popular entertainment was filled with stories, glorifying conflict, and the humans who emerged victorious from impossible odds. Jiwon studied the intercepts with growing confidence rather than concern. She interpreted the humans' obsession with warfare as proof of their primitive nature. Civilized species had evolved beyond the need for constant conflict and learned to resolve disputes through diplomacy and negotiation. The fact that humans still fought wars among themselves proved they were too backward to pose any real threat to an advanced galactic empire. The fleet continued its approach toward Earth with weapons powered and shields raised. Standard Imperial doctrine called for demanding immediate surrender before beginning bombardment. If the primitives were wise, they would submit without resistance and accept incorporation into the Empire. Their world would be strip-mined for its valuable resources, and the surviving population would be relocated to less desirable planets where they could serve the Empire as laborers. Minho felt a strange uneasiness as they passed the outer planets of the system. Something about the radio transmissions bothered him in ways he could not explain. The humans spoke constantly about freedom and independence, as if these concepts held some special meaning beyond mere political arrangements. They told stories about individuals who fought against overwhelming odds and somehow achieved victory through determination and sacrifice. Most troubling were their accounts of previous invasions throughout their history. Time and again, foreign armies had conquered human territories only to face endless resistance from populations that refused to accept defeat. The humans seemed to believe that death was preferable to submission, and they fought with a ferocity that eventually wore down even superior forces. But Jiwon dismissed these concerns as irrelevant. The humans had only fought against other humans using primitive weapons and crude tactics. They had never faced the advanced technology and overwhelming firepower of a galactic empire. Their small planet could not possibly resist the combined might of 200 warships equipped with weapons that could shatter continents. The fleet reached the inner system and prepared for their final approach to Earth. Minho gave the order to open communication channels and demand the planet's immediate surrender. He expected the humans to respond with either terrified, pleading, or confused silence. Instead, the response came immediately in clear galactic standard from someone who identified himself as Commander Lee Dong-hae of the Earth Defense Force. The human's voice was calm and professional as he delivered a message that chilled every Valthari officer who heard it. Lee spoke as if he had been expecting their arrival and had prepared for this exact moment. He thanked them for coming so far just to prove that some species never learned from the mistakes of others. The commander informed them that they were now entering a restricted zone that had been declared off-limits to all foreign military vessels. He gave them exactly 1 hour to reverse course and leave the system or face the consequences of their decision. Then the transmission ended, leaving the Valthari fleet staring at empty space where they had expected to find a helpless primitive world. Fleet Captain Yoon Ji-won stared at the communication console in disbelief. The primitive humans had not only detected their arrival, but had responded with threats and ultimatums. No species in galactic history had ever dared to give the Valthari Empire a deadline. She ordered the fleet to continue their advance toward Earth while charging all weapon systems. The tactical displays showed their 200 ships spreading across space in perfect formation, with overlapping fields of fire each. Vessel carried enough destructive power to level continents, and their combined firepower could reduce an entire world to molten slag. Ji-won had conquered 47 worlds during her career, and every single one had surrendered immediately upon. Seeing the overwhelming force arrayed against them, she expected Earth to follow the same pattern once the humans realized the futility of resistance. Commander Lee Dong-hae sat in the command center of Luna Base, buried deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon. He had been waiting for this moment his entire life. His ancestors had prepared for 300 years since the first alien probe had been detected entering the Sol system. That probe had been quietly destroyed before it could report back, but its presence had confirmed humanity's worst fears. They were not alone in the universe, and the other species out there possessed technology far beyond anything Earth could produce. The probe's wreckage had provided enough information to begin developing countermeasures. Humanity had spent the next 3 centuries building the most sophisticated defense network in galactic history. They had done so in complete secrecy while broadcasting carefully crafted radio signals designed to make them appear primitive and harmless. Every satellite that alien scouts might observe was actually a weapons platform disguised to look like crude communication equipment. Every space station appeared to be a simple research facility while hiding. Massive rail guns and missile batteries. The humans had studied every piece of alien technology they could acquire through destroyed scout ships and wreckage from ancient battlefields. They had reverse-engineered force field generators, gravity manipulators, and faster-than-light communication systems. But humanity had not simply copied alien designs. They had improved upon them using their unique understanding of warfare, developed through millennia of constant conflict. Earth's orbital defense grid consisted of thousands of platforms hidden throughout the solar system. Massive railguns built into asteroids could accelerate projectiles to near-light speed. Gravity mines disguised as space debris could create localized black holes that would tear apart any ship that came too close. Quantum disruptors hidden in seemingly empty space could phase through any known shield technology. Most importantly, humanity had developed something no other species possessed. They had created a doctrine of total warfare that viewed any threat to Earth as justification for complete annihilation of the enemy. Lee watched the Valthari fleet approach on his tactical displays. The alien ships moved in textbook formations that humanity had studied and analyzed for decades. Every maneuver they performed had been cataloged and appropriate countermeasures had been developed. The aliens had made the mistake of assuming that 300 years of careful observation meant nothing. They believed they were facing a primitive world that had barely achieved spaceflight. Instead, they were about to encounter a civilization that had spent centuries preparing for this exact scenario. Admiral Kang Min-ho studied the sensor readings as his fleet entered Earth's orbital space. Something was wrong with the tactical picture, but he could not identify what bothered him. The planet appeared exactly as their intelligence reports had described. A single small space station orbited the world along with a handful of crude satellites. There were no visible weapons platforms or defensive installations of any kind, yet the human commander had spoken with the confidence of someone who held all the advantages. Min-ho had fought enough battles to recognize the voice of a predator rather than prey. The 1-hour deadline expired without any change in the human position. Ji-won ordered the first attack wave to begin their assault. 50 ships detached from the main fleet and accelerated toward Earth. They were the newest vessels in the Valthari arsenal, equipped with shields that had never been penetrated and weapons that had cracked the defenses of every world they had encountered. The attack formation approached Earth's orbital space, expecting to meet token resistance from primitive rockets and crude nuclear warheads. Instead, they encountered weapons that should not have existed. The first indication of trouble came when the lead ships began reporting shield failures. Their defensive barriers were simply vanishing as if something was passing through them without any interaction. Then the kinetic strikes began. Projectiles moving at impossible speeds slammed into Valthari hulls with the force of small asteroids. The attack ships tried to evade, but found themselves caught in gravity wells that appeared from nowhere. Invisible mines detonated around them, creating miniature black holes that crushed their vessels like empty cans. The humans were not using energy weapons or explosive missiles. They were employing physics itself, as a weapon turning the laws of nature against their enemies. Commander Park Hyunwoo watched in horror as the tactical display showed the complete destruction of the attack. Wave 50 ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris in less than 10 minutes. Not a single human vessel had appeared on their sensors. The defenders were fighting from hidden positions using weapons that defied everything the Empire knew about military technology. The most terrifying aspect was the precision of the attack. Every Valthari ship had been targeted simultaneously by multiple weapon systems. The humans had not simply destroyed the attack wave. They had demonstrated complete control of the battlefield. Lee Donghae observed the destruction of the alien ships with grim satisfaction. Humanity had spent 3 centuries developing weapons specifically designed to counter advanced alien technology. The quantum disruptors could phase through any energy shield by existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The gravity mines used controlled black hole generation to create inescapable traps. The kinetic projectiles were accelerated by massive electromagnetic rails that drew power from the planet's entire electrical grid, but the most important weapon was information. Humanity had been intercepting alien communications for decades. They knew exactly how Valthari ships operated, what tactics they preferred, and what weaknesses their technology possessed. The humans had built specific countermeasures for every weapon in the alien arsenal. The attack had been less of a battle than a demonstration. Earth was showing the invaders that their technology and tactics were obsolete. Ji-won stared at the empty space where her attack wave had been destroyed. Her ship's sensors could detect no trace of human vessels or weapons platforms. The defenders appeared to be fighting from completely invisible positions. She ordered a full-spectrum scan of Earth's orbital space, but the results showed nothing unusual. Few primitive satellites continued broadcasting their simple radio signals. The small space station showed no signs of weapons or military activity, yet somehow 50 of the Empire's finest warships had been annihilated without inflicting any damage. On the enemy, Admiral Minho felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. The humans had not gotten lucky or stumbled upon some ancient alien weapon cache. They had deliberately prepared for this encounter, using intelligence gathered over centuries. Radio transmissions that had seemed so primitive were actually carefully crafted. Deceptions, Earth's apparent lack of technology, was an elaborate disguise hiding the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. The missing scout ships had not been destroyed by natural phenomena. They had been hunted down and eliminated by defenders who wanted to control exactly what information reached alien governments. Humanity had been playing a game of deception that spanned centuries. They had allowed themselves to appear weak and primitive while secretly building weapons that could challenge the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The realization hit Minho like a physical blow. Earth was not a primitive world waiting to be conquered. Was a trap that had been carefully prepared for arrogant empires who thought they could take whatever they wanted. The Valthari had been lured into attacking a civilization that had spent 300 years studying their weaknesses and developing countermeasures. Now they were caught in humanity's web with no way to escape and no idea how much worse things were about to become. Lee opened a new communication channel to the surviving alien ships. His voice remained calm and professional as he delivered humanity's final warning. The aliens had ignored the first deadline and paid the price. Now they faced a choice between complete withdrawal or complete destruction. He gave them exactly 30 minutes to begin their retreat or face the full wrath of Earth's defensive capabilities. The transmission ended, leaving the Valthari fleet alone in space, with the growing realization that they had made a terrible mistake. They had come to conquer a primitive world and instead had walked into the most sophisticated military trap in galactic history. Fleet Captain Yoon Ji-won refused to accept what her tactical displays were showing her. The destruction of 50 ships could not represent the true military capability of a primitive world. She convinced herself that the humans had somehow acquired a cache of ancient precursor weapons. Such discoveries had occurred before when lesser species stumbled upon abandoned technology. The important thing was that they had revealed their defensive positions by attacking. Now the Empire could target those locations and destroy them with overwhelming firepower. Ji-won ordered the remaining 150 ships to advance in full battle formation. She activated every shield generator and charged every weapon system to maximum capacity. The Valthari fleet moved toward Earth like an unstoppable wall of destruction. Their energy barriers overlapped to create an impenetrable defensive screen. Their combined firepower could reduce entire continents to molten glass. No force in the galaxy had ever stood against such concentrated military might. Captain Kim So-hee watched the alien fleet approach from her position aboard the stealth frigate. Invisible Fist, her ship looked exactly like a piece of space debris drifting aimlessly through the solar system. The humans had built hundreds of such vessels disguised as asteroids, comets, and abandoned satellites. They formed a hidden navy that could strike without warning from positions the enemy could never detect. So-hee had studied alien military doctrine for 20 years. She understood how civilized species fought their wars with formal battle lines and honorable single combat. Humanity had abandoned such concepts long before they reached the stars. They fought to win, regardless of cost, and used every possible advantage to achieve victory. The alien fleet entered the inner system with their weapons aimed at Earth. They expected to face fixed defensive positions that could be located and destroyed. Instead, they encountered something no galactic military had ever prepared. For the space around them suddenly came alive with hidden ships that materialized from what had appeared to be empty vacuum. Hundreds of human vessels revealed themselves by dropping their stealth fields and opening fire. But these were not traditional warships engaging in conventional space combat. The humans fought like a swarm of angry insects using tactics that defied every rule of civilized warfare. Their vessels moved in chaotic patterns that made targeting impossible. They used kamikaze attacks, ramming alien ships while playing deafening war music. They targeted life support systems instead of weapons, trying to kill crews rather than disable vessels. They broadcast terrifying battle cries in dozens of human languages that chilled alien souls. The Valthari had expected an organized defensive response they could counter with superior technology. Instead, they faced psychological warfare designed to break their will to fight. Lieutenant Park Sun-woo monitored the battle from the tactical center and watched his fellow officers begin to panic. The humans were not simply trying to destroy the fleet. They were conducting a campaign of terror intended to drive the aliens insane with fear. Every human tactic seemed calculated to maximize psychological damage. Their ships would appear from impossible angles and vanish before they could be targeted. They used weapons that created horrifying visual effects, like streams of liquid fire that ate through hull plating. They played recordings of human war songs that spoke of death and glory in terms that no civilized species could understand. Most disturbing were the humans who spoke directly to individual alien ships. They had somehow intercepted private communications and knew the names of crew members. Human voices would whisper threats and promises of doom to specific officers. They described in graphic detail what they intended to do to anyone who survived the battle. The psychological assault was more effective than any physical weapon. Valthari crews began abandoning their posts and fleeing to escape. Pod ships broke formation as their commanders lost control of terrified subordinates. The disciplined advance became a chaotic retreat. As panic spread through the fleet admiral, Kang Min-ho realized that his forces were being systematically destroyed, not by superior technology, but by superior understanding of warfare. The humans had studied alien psychology for centuries. They knew exactly which tactics would be most effective against different species. They had weaponized fear itself and turned it against their enemies. Captain So-hee led her squadron in a series of lightning attacks against the alien flagship. Her ships moved like sharks circling wounded prey. They would dart in from unexpected directions, fire a few shots, and disappear before the aliens could respond. The attacks were not intended to destroy the massive vessel. They were designed to demonstrate that nowhere was safe. The humans could strike at will against any target they chose. So-hee's pilots had trained their entire lives for this moment. They knew every weakness of alien ship design. They understood how to exploit the psychological vulnerabilities of species that had grown soft through centuries of easy conquest. Her weapons did not simply damage enemy vessels. They created spectacular explosions designed to terrify witnesses. They left wounded ships drifting helplessly while broadcasting distress, calls that demoralized other crews. The human fleet moved through the aliens like wolves hunting sheep. They separated individual ships from the main formation and destroyed them one by one. They used the wreckage of destroyed vessels as weapons, ramming it into other ships. They turned the aliens' own technology against them by hacking communication systems and broadcasting false orders. The Valthari found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Human ships would appear in exactly the right position to exploit every tactical mistake. They countered every defensive formation and neutralized every weapons system. The aliens began to suspect that the humans could read their minds in reality. The defenders were simply using intelligence gathered over centuries of observation. They had studied every aspect of Valthari military doctrine. They knew how alien commanders thought and what decisions they would make under pressure. The battle became a massacre as human forces demonstrated complete tactical superiority, but the most terrifying aspect was that they were clearly holding back. The humans could have destroyed the entire fleet in minutes. Instead, they were taking their time and savoring the hunt. They wanted the aliens to understand exactly how outmatched they were. They wanted to send a message that would be remembered by anyone who survived. Commander Park Hyunwoo watched ship after ship disappear from his tactical display. The humans were not content to simply win the battle. They were ensuring that no Valthari vessel would escape to warn the Empire. Cloaked hunters were systematically tracking down every ship that tried to flee. The aliens had come to Sol System as conquerors. Now they were trapped, prey being hunted by predators that had perfected the art of killing. The few remaining ships huddled together in a defensive formation. Their shields were failing, and their weapons were running out of ammunition. The crew members who had not already fled in escape pods were paralyzed with terror. They had never faced an enemy that fought with such savage efficiency. Admiral Minho realized that his entire career had been built on fighting civilized opponents. The Empire had conquered worlds inhabited by species that valued honor and followed rules of warfare. Humanity had abandoned such concepts in favor of total victory at any cost. They fought like rabid animals that would rather die than surrender. They used tactics that violated every convention of galactic military doctrine. They had turned warfare into an art form that no other species could match. The human fleet surrounded the surviving alien ships like vultures waiting for death. Their vessels moved in perfect coordination despite their chaotic appearance. Every movement was part of a larger plan that the aliens could not comprehend. The humans had been preparing for this battle for 300 years. They had studied every possible scenario and developed countermeasures for every situation. The Valthari had walked into a trap that had been designed specifically for them. Now they faced complete annihilation at the hands of a species they had dismissed as primitive. Captain Kim So-hee opened a communication channel to the surviving alien ships. Her voice was calm and professional as she delivered humanity's final ultimatum. The aliens had exactly 5 minutes to power down their weapons and prepare for boarding. Any ship that resisted would be destroyed immediately. Any crew member who fought back would be killed without mercy. The humans were offering one last chance for survival, but it came with conditions that no proud galactic empire had ever been forced to accept. The choice was simple: surrender completely or face extinction. The transmission ended, leaving the Valthari fleet alone with the knowledge that they had been utterly defeated by an enemy they had never understood. Admiral Kang Minho sat in his damaged command chair, surrounded by the wreckage of his bridge only. 12 ships remained from the mighty fleet that had entered the Sol system. His crew was either dead or cowering in terror. The tactical displays showed human vessels surrounding them like hungry predators. In 30 years of military service, he had never imagined such complete defeat was possible. A new transmission appeared on his communication screen. Commander Lee Dong-hae looked tired rather than triumphant. The human commander did not gloat over his victory or make threats about what would happen next. Instead, he seemed almost sad as he spoke to the surviving aliens. Lee explained that Admiral Minho was about to become part of a very old story. He asked if the Valthari wanted to understand why the precursors had warned everyone to stay away from Earth's region of space. Minho had no choice but to agree. His weapons were destroyed, his shields were down, and his ships were surrounded. If the humans wanted to talk, instead of finishing their slaughter, he would listen. What Lee revealed changed everything. The Empire thought it knew about galactic history. Dr. Choi Minji appeared on the screen next to the military commander. She was a small, elderly woman who looked nothing like the warriors who had just destroyed a galactic fleet, but her eyes held a depth of knowledge that made Minho uncomfortable. She began to tell a story that the Valthari had never heard. Humanity was not a primitive civilization that had recently achieved spaceflight. They were the survivors of multiple galactic genocides. Earth had been part of the galactic community for thousands of years. Human colonies had spread across dozens of star systems. They had been peaceful traders and explorers who contributed art, science, and culture to the galaxy. But other species had always been uncomfortable with humanity's violent history. Even though humans had learned to control their aggressive instincts, civilized aliens worried about their potential for warfare. The first galactic civilization to attempt genocide had been the Zephyrians. They were elegant, peaceful beings who believed violence was a mental illness that could be cured. The Zephyrians decided that humanity's capacity for war made them too dangerous to exist. They launched a coordinated attack designed to eliminate every human world simultaneously. Most of humanity died in that first genocide, but some survived in hidden colonies and deep space installations. Those survivors spent centuries rebuilding while studying Zephyrian technology. When they emerged from hiding, they were no longer the peaceful traders the galaxy remembered. They had become something harder and more dangerous. The Zephyrians discovered this. When their own worlds began dying, one by one, human revenge was patient and thorough. Every Zephyrian colony was systematically destroyed. Every ship was hunted down and eliminated. The species that had tried to cure humanity of violence was extinct. Within 50 years, the second galactic civilization to face humanity was the Corvani Empire. They were proud warriors who respected strength above all else. The Corvani admired humanity's military prowess and invited them to join their empire as elite soldiers. For 2 centuries, humans served loyally in Corvani armies. They learned advanced military technology and studied alien tactics. But the Corvani eventually decided that their human allies had become too powerful. They feared that humanity would eventually challenge their authority, so they planned another genocide disguised as a military campaign. The humans discovered the plot and turned their knowledge of Corvani weaknesses against their former masters. The empire that had valued strength, above all, was destroyed by the very soldiers they had trained. The third civilization to encounter humanity was the Ethereal Collective. They were ancient beings of pure energy who considered themselves the guardians of galactic peace. The Collective had observed humanity's previous conflicts and decided that the species was fundamentally corrupted. They believed that humans would eventually destroy all life in the galaxy if allowed to continue existing. So they used their vast powers to attack Earth directly. The Ethereals could manipulate matter and energy on a planetary scale. They turned entire worlds into weapons and commanded forces that seemed godlike. But humanity had learned from their previous near extinctions. They had developed technology that could counter even supernatural abilities. The war against the Collective lasted for centuries. Entire star systems were destroyed in battles that reshaped local space. When it ended, the Ethereals were gone and humanity stood alone. Among the ruins, each genocide had taught humanity new lessons about survival. They learned to appear weak while growing strong. They discovered how to hide their true capabilities until the moment of revelation. Most importantly, they understood that the galaxy would never accept their existence, so they developed a new strategy. Instead of expanding openly, they would remain hidden on Earth. They would monitor galactic civilizations and wait for the next species to discover them. When that happened, they would be ready. Dr. Choi explained that the precursor warnings were not ancient prophecies. They were messages left by the previous civilizations that had tried to destroy humanity. Each species had learned too late what Earth really was. The precursors had been the fourth galactic power to encounter humanity. They had been the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Their technology was so sophisticated that they seemed to exist outside normal physics. The precursors had studied humanity for millennia before deciding that the species posed an existential threat to all life. They launched the most comprehensive genocide attempt in galactic history. Every human world was attacked simultaneously by weapons that could destroy matter. At the quantum level, Earth itself was bombarded with forces that should have reduced the planet to elementary particles, but humanity survived even that ultimate test. They had spent the centuries since their last near-extinction developing defenses that could counter any conceivable weapon. The precursors discovered that humans had become something beyond their understanding. They were no longer simply a violent species. They had evolved into the ultimate survivors, beings capable of adapting to any threat and overcoming any enemy. The war against the precursors lasted for thousands of years. It was fought across multiple dimensions using weapons that bent the laws of reality. When it ended, the most advanced civilization in galactic history was extinct. Only humanity remained to carve warnings into stone for the next species that would discover them. Admiral Minho listened to this impossible history with growing horror. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not only survived 4 separate attempts at genocide, they had destroyed every civilization that had tried to eliminate them. The Valthari Empire was not facing a primitive world. They were confronting the apex predators of the galaxy, beings that had been forged by millennia of survival against impossible odds. Commander Lee continued the story with obvious reluctance. He explained that humanity took no pleasure in these victories. Each genocide had cost them billions of lives and forced them to become something they had never wanted to be. They had started as peaceful explorers who dreamed of friendship among the stars. Now they were the monsters that other species created through their own fear and hatred, but humanity had learned that the galaxy would never change. There would always be another civilization that decided humans were too dangerous to live. So they had developed a new approach to survival. Instead of hiding until they were discovered, they would actively monitor galactic civilizations. They would identify potential threats long before those threats became aware of Earth. And they would prepare specific countermeasures for each species that might eventually find them. The radio transmissions that had seemed so primitive were carefully designed bait. They were intended to attract exactly the kind of arrogant empire that would attempt conquest. The orbital defenses were not just weapons. They were demonstrations intended to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Choi revealed that several officers from the previous extinct civilizations had chosen to remain on Earth. They had been offered the same choice that Admiral Minho now faced. They could return home with proof of what had happened, or they could stay and help humanity prepare for the next inevitable encounter. Lieutenant Park Sunwoo volunteered immediately, despite his terror. He was fascinated by human military doctrine and wanted to understand how they had achieved such impossible victories. Commander Lee accepted his request, but warned him about the price of such knowledge. Anyone who stayed on Earth would witness humanity's true nature. They would see the careful preparation and patient planning that went into every aspect of human survival. They would understand how a single species had defeated 4 galactic civilizations, and they would carry that knowledge for the rest of their lives. The choice was offered to Admiral Minho. He could return to Valthari space with complete records of humanity's capabilities, would carry proof that Earth was not a primitive world waiting to be conquered. He would deliver the message that humanity had perfected over millennia. Stay away or face the same fate as every other species that had tried to destroy them. The transmission ended, leaving Minho alone with the most important decision of his life. Admiral Kang Minho stared at the communication screen long after the transmission had ended. His bridge was silent, except for the hum of failing life support systems. The 12 surviving ships of his once mighty fleet drifted helplessly in space, surrounded by human vessels that seemed to materialize from nothingness. He understood now that every aspect of his mission had been anticipated and planned for. The humans had been waiting for the Valthari Empire to find them. They had prepared for this exact scenario with the patience of a species that measured time in geological ages. Minho thought about the choice Commander Lee had offered him. He could return home with evidence of humanity's true nature, or he could stay and become part of Earth's eternal vigil against the next threat. The weight of decision pressed down on him like the gravity of a collapsing star. If he returned, he would have to convince the Empire's leadership that their greatest military force had been destroyed. By a single primitive world, he would have to explain that humanity was not just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. The ultimate survivors who had turned extinction into evolution. Captain Kim So-hee's voice came through the communication system with calm authority. She informed the surviving Valthari that they had exactly 1 hour to make their decision. Any ship that attempted to flee without permission would be destroyed immediately. Any attempt to send messages outside the solar system would result in the complete elimination of all survivors. The humans controlled every aspect of the situation with the precision of a species that had practiced this scenario countless times. Dr. Choi Minji appeared on Minho's screen again. She looked even more tired than before, as if the weight of humanity's history pressed heavily on her shoulders. She explained that Lieutenant Park Sun-woo had already been transferred to Luna Base, where he would begin learning the true scope of Earth's defensive capabilities. The young officer would discover that what he had witnessed was only a small demonstration of humanity's military potential. The orbital platforms that had destroyed the Valthari fleet were considered obsolete by current human standards. Earth's real defenses were hidden in dimensions that most species could not even perceive. Weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. Defensive systems that existed outside normal space-time technology. That had been developed through millennia of fighting impossible wars against godlike enemies. Sun-woo would also learn about humanity's intelligence network. They had been monitoring the Valthari Empire for over 2 centuries. Every ship design, every tactical doctrine, every political decision had been studied and catalogued. The humans knew more about Valthari military capabilities than most Imperial officers. They had developed specific countermeasures for every weapon in the alien arsenal. Attack on Earth had been less of a battle than a carefully orchestrated demonstration. Commander Lee Dong-hae contacted the remaining ships individually. He spoke to each captain personally, explaining the choice they faced. Most chose to return home, carrying humanity's message to the Empire, but several officers requested permission to stay. They were fascinated by human military doctrine and wanted to understand how a single species had achieved such impossible victories. Lee accepted their requests, but warned them about the psychological cost. Anyone who remained on Earth would witness the full scope of humanity's preparation for war. They would see weapons that violated every law of physics. They would observe tactical planning that spanned centuries. They would understand how humanity had turned survival into an art form, and they would carry that knowledge for the rest of their lives. Admiral Minho finally made his decision. He would return to Valthari space with the evidence of humanity's true nature. His duty to the Empire required him to warn them about the mistake they had made, but he requested permission to leave behind his tactical officer, Commander Park Hyun-woo. The young officer had shown genuine interest in learning from humanity's military experience. Lee agreed, and Hyun-woo was transferred to join Sun-woo on Luna Base. The 2 Valthari would become part of a small community of aliens who had chosen to study human warfare. They would join officers from previous civilizations who had made the same choice. Veterans of wars against the Zephyrians, Corvani, and Ethereals. Beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of galactic empires, all united by their fascination with humanity's unique approach to survival. The transfer of personnel was completed with mechanical efficiency. Human ships provided the damaged Valthari vessels with enough supplies to reach the edge of the solar system, but they also installed monitoring devices that would track the aliens' journey home. Humanity wanted to ensure that their message reached the appropriate authorities. They also wanted to observe the Empire's reaction to learning about Earth's true nature. Admiral Minho's final transmission to the Valthari High Command was recorded and stored in human databases. It would serve as another data point in humanity's ongoing study of galactic civilizations. The Admiral's ship limped away from Earth, carrying complete tactical recordings of the battle video footage showing the systematic destruction of an Imperial fleet by an apparently primitive world, evidence that humanity possessed technology far beyond anything the Empire had encountered. but most importantly proof that Earth's region of space was protected by something that defied all conventional understanding of warfare. The recordings would spread throughout Valthari space like wildfire. Every military officer would study them, trying to understand how such a defeat was possible. The footage would eventually reach other galactic civilizations through intelligence networks and diplomatic channels. Each species would analyze the evidence and reach the same conclusion. Earth was not a world to be conquered. It was a tomb for the ambitions of galactic empires. The Valthari High Command convened an emergency session within days of receiving Minho's report. The evidence was undeniable despite its impossible implications. Their greatest military force had been destroyed by a single planet. The survivors spoke of weapons that violated the laws of physics. They described tactical capabilities that seemed to anticipate every possible move. Most disturbing were the historical claims made by the human commander. The suggestion that previous galactic civilizations had been destroyed by Earth was initially dismissed as propaganda, but archaeological teams began examining precursor ruins with new eyes. They found evidence that supported humanity's claims references to previous wars against species that no longer existed. Warnings about the third planet that became more urgent with each iteration. Technical specifications for weapons that matched those used against the Valthari fleet. The Empire faced a choice that would define their future. They could attempt another attack with even greater force, or they could accept that some regions of space were simply too dangerous to enter. The decision was unanimous. Earth's solar system was declared a forbidden zone. All Imperial vessels were ordered to avoid the region completely. Trade routes were rerouted to bypass the entire sector. The official reason given to the public was the discovery of dangerous spatial anomalies, but military commanders understood the truth. They had encountered something that could not be conquered. Meanwhile, on Earth, Commander Li Donghe updated the historical records. Another galactic civilization had learned the lesson that humanity had been teaching for millennia. The cost of trying to destroy Earth was complete extinction. The Valthari had been wiser than their predecessors. They had chosen survival over pride. New inscriptions were added to precursor monuments throughout the galaxy. Ancient stone and metal surfaces received fresh warnings in the Valthari language. They were warned to stay away from Earth's region. Their hubris led to their ruin. Learn from our mistake. The messages would remain until the next civilization discovered them, and there would be a next civilization. Humanity had learned that the galaxy was filled with species who believed they were destined to rule. Eventually, another empire would decide that Earth was too valuable to ignore. They would dismiss the warnings as primitive superstition. They would convince themselves that their technology was superior to anything a single world could possess, and they would learn the same lesson that had been taught to the Zephyrians, the Corvani, the Ethereals, the Precursors, and now the Valthari. Some things in the universe were too dangerous to disturb. Some sleeping giants were better left undisturbed. Some regions of space carried warnings for very good reasons. Dr. Choi Minji stood in the observation deck of Luna Base watching the last Valthari ship disappear into hyperspace. The alien vessel carried humanity's message. To another corner of the galaxy soon, the warning would spread to other civilizations. They would learn that Earth was protected by something that had survived every attempt at genocide. The cycle would continue as it had for thousands of years. Humanity would wait and watch and prepare. They would monitor galactic civilizations and identify potential threats. They would develop countermeasures and practice scenarios, and when the next arrogant empire arrived, they would be ready. Earth remained alone, in its corner of the galaxy, protected by the reputation of a species that had turned survival into perfection. The planet that had been shaped by war. The world that had learned to fight gods and win. The home of humanity. The graveyard of empires.